Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time today to join the Publicize webinar with TechCrunch editor and startup founder John Biggs. For over a decade, John has covered technology and startups for publications like GizModo, the New York Times, and Laptop Magazine. After writing extensively about thousands of startup founders for TechCrunch, in 2014, John switched roles, starting a few different companies, including editor-as-a-service startup Typewriter, and FitRock, an app that provides users discounts for walking instead of driving to your favorite local shops. In his Medium article, What Happens When You Write 11,000 Blog Posts, he gives great insight into the life of a tech journalist, and I've included a link below so you can all read it. In addition to the commentary about the broken state of the news business, the sometimes unhealthy lifestyle of tech writers, and acknowledging that most of what a writer posts online goes unread, John also has a great anecdote about a story he wrote that saved a small company and the phone call he received from the woman whose company he helped. He briefly acknowledged how good this made him feel, and then, as he wrote, he went on to write 16 more blog posts that day. This struck me as a good starting point to the conversation about how startup founders can provide value to journalists, because a basic appreciation for the job and understanding that none of our companies have the right to media coverage, I think, are the building blocks. With all of his experience on both sides of the table, I think John is the perfect person to talk about how founders can provide value to the media. I'll ask John a few questions, and at the end, we can open up for questions from the audience. John, thanks a lot for having us today, or for being here with us. Yeah, thanks a lot. I saw a couple of, I think that was a little bit of a warm and fuzzy intro, and I've seen a couple of your talks online, and so if it was a little too sappy for you, forgive me. Maybe we could get right into it with a description. If maybe you could just tell the listeners what it's like to be a tech reporter.
Well, I mean, it depends on how you come at it. So right now, tech reporting is, well, it's hard to get access when we first started out. So getting access to technology and review units and all that good stuff is really impossible. Now it's actually far too easy. So plus you're up against millions of tech blogs, thousands of tech blogs, I'd say. So it's really saturated. So you're in a world where the average, I guess, new tech product has the possibility of being in hundreds of posts on hundreds of sites instantaneously, as long as you set up the embargo right. Startups have the opportunity to become viral in a few minutes if they play their cards right. But you also have the opportunity to sink immediately and just disappear. So the power available to, I guess you could say, marketers, people who are trying to get a message across, is at once massively powerful, and it's also surprisingly weak. So something that goes out today can hit or it doesn't hit, and there's really no telling how, and there's no secret mixture to make it hit. And that's one of the most frustrating things about telling people about stuff right now.
You mentioned massively powerful and at the same time very weak. Could you kind of describe the aspects that or the leg ups that the marketing firms might have now that they might not have had 10, 20 years ago?
Well, I mean, if they do it correctly, so marketing firms 20 years ago, you put a press release in an envelope and you mailed out about 50 of them, and you hope that somebody picked it up. And then you did calls and all this other good stuff. And there's still plenty of PR people who still think that's the way to do things. The change is that you and I could start a new company right now. We could put it on Product Hunt. We could get 1 million people to sign up, quite literally 1 million people. I mean, it's entirely feasible. We wouldn't need a PR company. We wouldn't need a marketing company. But then again, you're in a situation where a small startup thinks it doesn't need a marketing company and it needs one desperately, and it just basically sinks under the ocean. So there's really no tried and true way to get attention anymore in the way it used to be. But the attention that you can get is really, really powerful. And but if you fail, you fail quite miserably. And there's only one or two chances for you to really hit it.
You mentioned product hunt. Do you think that tech journalists, kind of as the gatekeepers, maybe 10 years back, to information about the space, how big of it is, or I guess, how do you feel the challenge coming from other types of influencers, well, whether it be a person with a YouTube channel that reviews gadgets or something like that, or product hunt? Does that just kind of add to the
That just adds to the mix.
Competition?
I think a lot of the influencer marketing is garbage right now. I think a lot of people are paying a lot of people a lot of money to do really dumb things. And maybe in video gaming, there's a couple guys that you can pay to talk about your thing. But there's really this generation worldwide knows what marketing is in a very deep way. So if you're actually trying to sell people on some kind of special makeup or whatever, and you pay someone to put it on for $10,000, then you're basically throwing your money down the toilet. The bump that you get out of making Kim Kardashian put on your makeup is instantaneous. It's overnight, and it lasts for about 24 to 48 hours, and that's basically it. In terms of true marketing, you basically have to tell stories over and over again, and those stories best come from you, best come from people who like what you do.
And why is a journalist important? Is there a certain trust level of somebody that follows?
I mean, at this point, a journalist isn't important. But if you really like what Walt Mossberg has to say, you're going to read everything he writes, and you're going to go and you're going to, I don't know, look at the stuff that he talks about. But guys like Walt Mossberg, guys like me, guys like I don't know, Brian Lamb, and those guys over at GizModo and Wirecutter, they're becoming far less important than they used to, and the real messaging now is basically brand to consumer, and it kind of sucks, and it's really confusing, and it's really difficult, but that's the way it's going.
Where do you see the role then of a journalist? What's the importance of a journalist in the tech? Let's stick to the tech space.
To cut through the lies, essentially. Unfortunately, that's not how it looks right now. That's not how it works right now, but eventually it will. So I think there needs to be a far more antagonistic approach in journalism towards snake oil, towards bad ideas, towards failures, that sort of thing. As it stands now, it's basically just like a big happy hug, and that's garbage.
I can see that, and I think you have. I know you have a lot more experience and years under your belt than I in the field. And I was wondering if you can tell me, was there a point where at the beginning or somewhere along the way, that was the role of a journalist, what you just described, and then somewhere it kind of went a little haywire, and you think it might come back around again to that that information?
In the days of like enthusiast media, there were forums and things that you could go to, and you could figure out if this graphics card was better than the other graphics card. And the fact that that existed at all was a huge step forward. So remember, the way it used to be is you basically used to have a magazine, like PC magazine, that was as thick as a phone book, and you'd go through it and you'd figure out what's good, what's not good. Then you had forums where people could go and figure out that this graphics card was better than this graphics card, and this guy who I know and I trust says that's the truth. And if that graphics card doesn't appear in that site, or that graphics card receives, I don't know, a lower rating, then you can kind of trust it, CNET and all that other good stuff. At this point, there's so much noise. There's so many different places that you could go to get information. Like, I don't write about awful stuff. So if I get something that's awful, I won't write about it, and it just doesn't show up. But that technique, that strategy doesn't work anymore, because someone somewhere is going to write about the garbage. And they're gonna write about it and smile about it, because this is access journalism. So they're worried about getting access to future garbage, I guess.
And you mentioned in your post about working at GizModo and how you guys kind of invented the listicle, invented those techniques that BuzzFeed is using now, for example. But can you tell me, in the pressure to get things out, and with all the competition What's been lost? Has there been anything lost in terms of quality?
I mean, nothing's been lost. I would argue that the average journalist 20 years ago who didn't have the internet might have done a little bit more work and might have been a little more conscientious. But what you lose, you can have three things. You can have speed, you can have absolute accuracy, and you can have, I guess you could say, sort of readability. And you can basically pick two. So in the internet, you basically can get speed or absolute accuracy. You could get speed or readability, etc. But you can basically only pick two. And right now, unfortunately, speed takes up one of those spots. Absolute accuracy is feasible when you're very fast, but you basically end up towing the party line. You basically use the specs that you're given, and you don't actually add anything. But if you want something that's a little more opinion driven or something a little more usable, readable, I guess you could say, then you in some cases you kind of you sacrifice the absolute accuracy. So you can basically pick two in that case. And the fact that there are hundreds of other blogs out there who are doing things as fast and potentially as good as you is also kind of disheartening for especially young bloggers.
Okay. Can you tell me, do you still feel the same way that you felt about the profession and you wrote the blog post about how you feel when you read 11,000 blog posts?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, it's an exhausting operation. You're basically sending stuff out into the ether. Um, one of the primary problems when you do blogging, when a like a newspaper journalist, and there aren't that many left, but when they move over into blogging, they think that they have to cover everything. They think they have to do all the tricks that they did in the newspaper because they think somebody actually cares. Somebody's actually reading. Vast majority of stuff that goes up isn't read, or isn't read very much. The low hanging fruit of blogging, the way you get traffic is not by posting kitten pictures. It's actually posting hundreds of kitten pictures. So the primary problem here is that you're in a mindset where you want to do one or two posts a day, but what you really have to do is do 10 posts a day, 20 posts a day. And that's the only way to get your traffic. So you have to abandon that old attitude of I'm doing the world a favor by posting, and instead have an attitude of I'm doing the world a favor by existing, I guess.
Interesting. I was wondering if you could tell me, like you said in the post again, much of what you write goes unread. And is there a type of article, let's use just TechCrunch as an example, with a standard company launch or a funding announcement or something. When you write those, are you thinking in your head, hey, this is gonna be read by thousands of people, or do you just kind of know this isn't good, or
No,
not necessarily not good?
Like a company launch is basically the lowest common denominator. That's the I don't know, the M&M of the post world. So are people proud of company launches? I mean, you're basically doing somebody a favor. I would argue that a lot of the bigger sites that you read, like VentureBeat and all these guys, they basically have no juice when it comes to launches. I think TechCrunch still has some juice. So basically, if you get a TechCrunch post, you're almost guaranteed about 8,000 new users, a nice bump in traffic for about 48 hours. So you feel good, and plus you can send it to your mom or whatever, so she can see what it looks like. But a lot of these sites don't have the juice, and for founders and for marketers to fight or offer embargoes or offer exclusives and all this other garbage that they try to do to bump themselves up, it's essentially just wasted effort.
And PR folks, of course.
Yeah.
So then in that case, what is a good story? What do you know that is going to be great for your readers and it's going to get a lot of views?
It's got to be a human story. This is actually an interesting example. If you actually want to pull something off I don't know. I don't know how I can change this to make it. Well, it doesn't even matter. It's just some dude. This dude has an app, and he's under the mistaken impression. I'll just kind of change it. Let me try to load it up here. Where is it? He was under the mistaken impression that he was supposed to do a story for some kind of, I don't know, some kind of very specific trade journal, and he had three ideas. That his app supports the work of the late Jaime Escalante, the stand and deliver guy, by donating its software to the math program he founded to help underserved Latino students to achieve the highest level in math. So this is his first idea for a news story. That's not news. The app delivers digital equity in underserved communities through its discounted pilot program. So he's doing kids a favor by giving it cheaper, which isn't news either, because it's not free. That some kind of agency recognizes the app as a commitment to equity and education, selects them as the national partner for student surveys. Nobody knows what the people are, the organization is, and nor does anybody care. So what I told him is that if I'm going to go sit down with a beer with you, I want him to tell me about his business, and he starts telling me that this organization said that they were really good and they're giving out free stuff to I don't know, poor kids. That's extremely self-serving, and there's no humanity to it. There's no anima. If he told me about how somebody was using it to change a student's life, and he actually had that information, he actually talked to his customers and understood their customers and could tell that story, that's a real story. That's a story that somebody actually cares about. So instead of sending a press release that Joe Smith just became the head of, I don't know, developer relations at Schnorglox Software, you tell the story of Joe Smith trying to fix something for somebody and how he did it. And that's actually an interesting story, because that actually piques my interest. Then maybe I'll write about Schnorglox Software. Then maybe I actually care about it. But as it stands, if you just tell me that won an award, or they just raised some money, I really don't care. And nobody cares. Quite literally, nobody in the world cares. Maybe there's one or two investors who are just who are way out of the loop and think that they can invest based on that. But it's like reading the Wall Street Journal to invest in equities. You can't do it anymore. It has to be. It's all robotic.
And what happens when it's a company launch and they don't have any users to tell that story, but they do have a mission to kind of change the world? How strong can that be if you relay it correctly?
If you relay it correctly, if you're not holier than thou, and you're not overly serious about it, nobody, unless you're curing cancer, your app doesn't matter in the great scheme of things. And I know this, and I'll admit this to myself. Unless you're sending me to Mars, nothing you do really matters. You don't deserve coverage at all. Therefore, what is the most addressable? What is the easiest to understand? What is the kindest and most interesting way to communicate what you're doing with me, and to pique my interest in that way?
Okay, great. Yeah, I hope that answered Larry's question about how do we pitch journalists to cover a launch. I'm not sure if you want. This might be a good time to just segue into that.
How to pitch journalists? I mean, as you can probably tell, I'm probably the hardest guy to pitch. If you're a small publicist and you're just starting out, you have to have a stable of people that you talk to, and you have to be friends with them. And it sucks because you have to actually talk to people and meet them, but you can't just send press releases. It just doesn't work. I've done it multiple times, and it never happens. The people you talk to have to know who you are and have to expect good things from you. And the vast majority of PR people will call me and grunt into the phone about some garbage, and they immediately they think that they're immediately going to get a story out of it, and they're not going to get a story, and they're definitely not going to get a story out of me. I'm particularly hard to talk to in that context. If you want to go grab a beer and talk about your thing and show a robot in a bar, then I'm happy to do that. We can do that because it humanizes the whole operation. And again, I'm lucky. I've been doing 10 years at TechCrunch, and I've been doing it for 10 years before that elsewhere. So I'm at a point in my career where I can pick and choose, and I don't have to. And I don't have to pretend to be hungry for news, because I know what I like to write about and what's important and what my readers want to read. If you're a new journalist or a new PR person, you have no idea what those two variables are. So your mission is to figure that stuff out. And you have to go to events, you have to hold events, you have to send out emails that ask questions, and you have to receive those emails and figure out if those things are worth your time. And it's only through that human relationship that you can pull it off. There's going to be enough robots in this world shortly that we don't need any more spam. So your mission as a PR person is to tell a human story and actually create a relationship with those with the journalist you're trying to talk to.
And how would you suggest? I mean, somebody on the other side of the world wants to pitch you, and they can't sit down in New York and have a beer with you. What is there anything that they can do without having that prior relationship to have them or have you understand a little bit about themselves, so you can kind of get a feel for them? Or is there anything in the email, for example, or in a phone call that you would like included in a pitch?
I mean, I have a thing on my site, Big White Logic. It's like how to pitch me, and it's basically this huge list of stuff. I also have a list of questions. I don't know if I type something here, will people see it?
Yeah, you can type it in the comments, and I can get a link to your site as well and throw it in there.
So these are the questions that I ask, and these are the most important questions that I think are especially for TechCrunch. If you're overseas and you're trying to get my attention or trying to get anybody's attention, the first thing you have to do is make sure that everything's spelled right. The worst thing you can do is send an email that's that's poorly written. Further, you shouldn't be flip or coy. We get a lot of emails from overseas where they're trying to be cool. They think that Silicon Valley is all about being informal and like cursing a lot, and that never works. There's some sort of growth hacking mentality, this sort of programmer idea, where you can just be a jerk in the email and expect reaction, and you don't. That never works. And essentially, you have to tell your story immediately. We are an app that does X. We are an app that does X. Yeah, I guess it came out. We're an app that does X for a X million person audience of certain types of people. We have a special sauce, which is this thing that I'm going to describe to you. And we have already raised X amount, or we already have 5,000 users, or we've just started out and we're really excited about it, or we have something special about our founders that we can tell you about. And that's basically all you need. The other thing is there's an expectation that journalists will care about your idea more than as much as you do, and they don't. They don't care about it at all. When it's done, it's done. And they're lucky if they remember your name and face afterwards. I'm not saying that to be mean. I'm saying that to prepare people for eventual rejection. But that's essentially the situation.
So maybe we can move on from now. Now we've pitched. Now perhaps you've even written a story, and we've established a bit of a relationship. And you just said, you're not going to remember who this person is after you've written a few blog posts later, right? So is there anything else that that a founder can do to help you out along the way, maybe perhaps until the next time that they have a big announcement and they want to reach out to you with any suggestions? And we can go through a couple of them, but
yeah, I think the primary suggestion is that people have to understand that their idea of news is not the journalist's idea of news. So traditionally, people will send in posts like, I don't know, we just got some funding, or we just got 10,000 users or whatever, and that's fine. Got it. Yeah, that's great that you did that, but that's not news. I would rather not write that. If you have a new version out, or some big changes, or you've pivoted, or you've done something actually interesting, then yeah, let's talk about that.
And then, okay, so in the meantime, would let's say, how important is it for you that people follow you on social media, share your work, etc.?
It's not important.
And how important is it if people were to provide you with inside information that might not be about their company, about something that you think or that they think you would be interested in writing?
Zero. There's a technique that they use where they try to say, like, our CEO Joe Smith can comment on Microsoft, and Joe Smith can't comment on Microsoft unless he works at Microsoft, and even then he's not gonna be able to comment freely. That's literally the worst pitch you could send out. If you send that out, then you've already failed. What people think is that they think they can use that they can use a quote in a story as sort of a springboard for a relationship or some sort of media outreach, and that never works. So don't even do that.
Are there any things that the startup founders can do that would add value to what you do, or to, I mean, that's a stupid marketing term, add value, but
Yeah.
would that you would appreciate?
I just want answers to those questions over there on the side, and some kind of images. That's all I care about. Any value add is extremely limited. Nobody has any time to read 15 pages or whatever else you're going to send out. Nobody has any time to look at PowerPoints, and looking at PowerPoints is actually dangerous on the wrong kind of computer. So there's really no benefit. What kind of images? High res images, 1024 by whatever on the top end, nice and big. You basically have to send images for Retina screens now.
How about on a macro level? How can we help the media that's struggling so much financially?
You can buy ads. That's basically it.
Mm-hmm.
But you're not going to do that, so it's going to be messy. What's going to actually happen, and this is what nobody wants to hear, but what's going to happen is there's going to be a methodology for micropayments for publishing. So just as you can't game Reddit, there's possibility you can mess with it a little bit. Over time, there's going to be the user is going to get cash from their post. So, for example, I did a post the other day. It was a political post. I got 152,000 views on Medium, and if I had monetized that, if I even got a cent from that, I would have had a nice down payment on a I don't know, a boat. I don't know what the heck I could buy, but I couldn't. I didn't do it, and it's pointless for me to put anything on Medium now. Because I've realized that you really get nothing out of it. I had an Amazon link at the bottom of it, and I got $100 out of the whole operation because I recommended 2 books, and I got no, and that's basically it. So if I'm going to be a writer, and I'm writing anything of value, I'm going to want some sort of micropayment system. What happens when micropayments come along? You no longer have any of the upper hand. There's no advertising. There's no advertising bias. And not that there ever is, but there's always that feeling like if you write about Sony, that Sony sucks, then they're going to pull your advertising. Of
course,
I've pulled past that in my own career, but there are plenty of people out there, especially in the car, especially in the gaming, especially in the luxury goods worlds, that are still suffering under that delusion. But once micropayments come along, that's going to change the entire dynamic. That's we're going to be in a situation where where folks are, where the journalist is not beholden to any brand, and that's when the brands have to do their own content. And I know that that's going to happen, and it's going to change. But there's always going to be somebody that you trust, who's going to tell you the right story, and you're going to be able to pay them a penny a click or whatever, just to read their information.
And would that come from like a PayPal coffer or something like that? That would be hooked up in whatever site we went to.
It'll probably be something a little more. It'll probably be something through Bitcoin or something like that. Some sort of very granular payment system.
Is there anybody doing that right now?
There are a few. There are people. Some people have some ideas, but they're horrible ideas. So they haven't really taken off yet. And the real key is to set up some sort of wallet that goes from site to site, or service to service.
Right.
And I mean, I've learned my lesson. I'm not going to put anything on. I'm not going to put anything on Medium anymore, because you just basically throw the no 21.co is garbage.
So is the logic behind it that people don't want to make that big investment into a New York Times subscription? However, they want the content bad enough that in the moment they're willing to spend a small amount of money.
Yeah, I mean, especially if it's painless. I mean, imagine your undying pleasure if you got I don't know, $1.50 from everybody who is watching this. Get $1.50 per half hour. If you drop out after a half hour, you don't have to pay the full $3 or whatever. And that sort of thing is the problem with 21 and Co. and a couple other places is that nobody's going to use those services, Bitcoin based services, in the way that 21 and Co. imagines they will. It's going to be an Apple Pay system, and it's going to be all the Bitcoin's going to be on the back end, or it's going to be a Visa system, or it's going to be a MasterCard system. The idea that a homegrown wallet can pop up based on somebody's coding prowess is ridiculous, and people just don't trust that in terms of fintech and financial interaction.
On the publication side, what do you think the ramifications would be in terms of like, let's say John Biggs is getting many more views and clicks than somebody else, and so he's definitely pulling the weight at the organization. Does that money go straight to him? Would it be more of like a tips system that we see in restaurants?
No, it goes straight to him. There are no in this idea. There are no organizations per se.
There are no publications.
Yeah, there are no
you follow a journal.
So you follow a single journalist, and it's hard to imagine this thing, but it's easy if you try. Think about something like Netflix, where when Netflix might pay a certain amount of money to get, I don't know, Luke Cage or something made, but a lot of the stuff that shows up there, they basically just pay out a couple pennies per view, and I don't have to be a blockbuster director if I can just get some attention.
Oh, it actually makes a lot of sense. It's an interesting topic or an interesting thought for sure. All right, so I guess are there any other macro things? Instead of paying for Google AdSense, just go ahead and pay on your favorite publication. Is that the best?
That's
what we got so far.
That's the solution. Yeah, I mean that's the only solution. The future of journalism is in peril. Is at once in peril and it's also fairly bright. The way journalism worked for centuries is going away, but the way journalism is going to work is coming back. So think about the YouTube stars. YouTubers are a good example of these things. They make all their money from millions of views, and they actually do make money. And NBC doesn't see any of that cash. HBO doesn't see any of that cash. And when they try to jump over to the more mainstream media organizations, that a lot of that stuff fails. I think that there was that one kid who did like the stupid voice or whatever, and he did a movie, and that didn't work. But he could feasibly do his own movie, cut it up into 20 pieces and put it on YouTube, and he'd probably be pretty happy.
And do you think that's just because his followers are more comfortable there, seeing him there?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's different consumption as well. So if your consumption is on the iPad in bed, putting it on the big screen TV just doesn't work. You just don't get the same. You don't get the same sense of connection.
Did you ever feel that way when you worked at the Times, or when you only had a blog for the New York Times?
I mean, you were completely disconnected at the Times. You basically just put stuff into a black hole. Whereas with a blog, you actually could talk to some people and you could actually interact with people. And then what I'm proposing down the line is they're actually paying you for your time and for your effort. And you're being they'll pay you because you're completely disconnected from the traditional traditional media machine.
Mm-hmm. So that interaction also, that interaction with your readers, you going back and forth in the comments or whatever it may be, um, that provides some sense of happiness for the job.
Sure, I think so. Yeah. You get a better understanding of what to write and when to write it. But it's also bad for marketers, because you can have a lot deeper opinions about what you want to write than you have in traditional systems.
And I'm sorry, I don't follow. Like, the deeper opinions come from more interaction, more knowledge that you get with
More
other people.
interaction and knowledge with the readers as opposed to the marketers. Wrote all this analytics and data play and editor role these days. It's all about essential news values. I would argue that zero analytics and data plays analytics and data plays zero role for most editors. Vast majority of editors. A, they don't understand it. B, they don't understand where you get traffic from. And if somebody comes along and tells them that you can get traffic by posting pictures of, I don't know, gerbils, then they're going to do it because they are so afraid of the technical that they're essentially going to give up. They're just going to roll over. So is it about essential news values? If essential news values are the values of writing stuff that people don't want to read, then yeah, absolutely. To a degree, you're going to have some editors and writers who actually understand it and are following it, and they can sort of they can walk the tightrope without dumbing the content down to absolute garbage, while still trying to gain the trust of the reader and actually offer stuff that people want to read.
So you think that still it's kind of a gut reaction of an editor what they decide to run with, or whatever it is in their psychology. It's not data that makes those decisions.
No, I don't think so. And if you end up looking at the data all the time, you drive yourself nuts. There are people out there who should look at the data, and that's the advertising folks. And at some point, I would argue post count is quite literally the only data that a blogger needs. How many posts am I doing a month? If I'm doing 2 posts a day, I'm going to fail. If I'm doing 10 posts a day, I'm going to do okay. And if I'm doing 60 posts a day, I can succeed in this whole business. But as you can imagine, doing 60 posts a day is really, really hard. Even doing 28 posts that I used to do is really hard. So you have to decide where you're going to end up on that continuum.
As more founders start to, how do I want to put this? I guess I've seen a kind of a uptick in guest articles written by company founders or people within the companies. And I was wondering, how do you think this affects the livelihood of journalists?
I don't think it affects it at all. I think those posts people see through those posts pretty quickly. Who are those posts for? Those posts are for the writer and his parents or her parents. That's literally the only people who read that stuff. I could give you some numbers on who reads guest posts. And it's just shocking. They give you a little bit of extra. So why do you post guest posts? You get more posts on the site. So if you have 1,000 hits on some guest post and then 6,000 hits on an actual post, you get 7,000 hits total. But if you don't have that guest post, you lose that. You basically leave that 1,000 posts, that's 1,000 hits on the table. So as a traffic generating machine, guest posts are great. You just post a bunch of stuff that somebody writes that may or may not be interesting to anybody out there in the world, and you're kind of guaranteed a certain amount because of organic and search traffic, and also basically social. So that's why BuzzFeed loves it. That's why HuffPo loves it. That's why Forbes is essentially now just a cesspool of submitted garbage.
Contributors.
Yeah, it's to the extent that people go around the world on junkets pretending to be Forbes contributors when my dog could be a Forbes contributor. So you can kind of see my opinion on guest posts. That said, it's extra traffic. If I'm a publisher, I'll do guest posts all day, because the startup founders put their all into these guest posts, and the vast majority of these guest posts are absolute garbage. And the ones that you do post are acceptable. and they still get, and if the entrepreneur has 10 friends, those 10 friends will spread it around to about 100 people, and you get about 1,000, 2,000 views. So that's basically free traffic.
Interesting. Let's see here. Can we switch gears a little bit into kind of just the small things that you like when you're interacting with the founder? Let's say you're interested in a story and that sort of thing. Like, how important is it to have a detailed press release or even a press kit? Is that important at all for you?
No. Press releases are gone. There are people who want to do them, and it's fun to edit them and then see them disappear into the ether. But you send a press release, you've already failed.
When's the last time you read a press release?
A couple years ago.
And what was the reasoning? Do you remember? I mean, did you say, hey, I just don't have enough information or time?
I don't know. I don't remember. I haven't, like, I don't think I even have. Well, so one of the tricks that I do is I actually delete all email at the end of the day. So if I miss, so anything that comes out, the vast majority of the time I get I'll get just a thing with an image, and that's good enough for me. I'll never read a press release. Press releases are, if you're sending a press release, then you've failed your client immediately.
And tell me, what is your process for writing a story, for getting the information of a story? How much information do you need right away? And then from that, how do you build your story?
I basically need the information that I put in that list of things. That gives me enough information to do a brief on a startup. I actually care about a topic with any depth or in any depth. I can do a lot more research. I'll actually go out there and do a lot more research. But as I said, you basically can pick two out of that triumvirate of potential benefits. And I try to be fast because I know that stuff needs to get up. And today's post is tomorrow's fish wrapper, so there's really no benefit in going in depth on anything unless it's really important, unless it does change the world.
Do you ever do interviews for these? Like, for example, if I were to just write the answers to your questions on the side, would you ask for an interview with the founder? Is that important?
I wouldn't. I don't need that, and I don't think most founders have enough media training to offer a in-depth enough interview, especially new founders. That's one of the problems.
What do they need to know?
They need to know everything about their business, and a lot of them don't. Or if it's very high level, like I've interviewed Jeff Bezos, and for all intents and purposes, he has guys right next to him who can give him all the information he needs. He knows exactly who those people are, and they're going to sit there next to you and say, you ask a question about the Kindle Fire, and the chip designer is going to be sitting next to you, and she says that this is how this works. Also, to a degree, Jeff Bezos has been in his business long enough that he knows all the ins and outs. Whereas if there's some startup founder who's, I don't know, made an app, what are they going to tell me that the actual value, the app isn't going to show me? They're going to tell me the origin story. They're going to tell me some of the development, but potentially most of the time they haven't developed anything themselves. And they're going to tell me maybe some of their, I don't know, struggles. And I don't think that's of any interest to anybody. Even with the humanity angle that you talked about before. Well, that's the wrong kind of humanity. They had trouble, I don't know, getting this thing outsourced in India. Whereas what the actual trouble is there's a teacher somewhere in the inner city who couldn't do X, Y, and Z, and this app helped her. If you can get me in touch with that, person, then that would work. Right. Okay. One last question, and then we'll ask or have a couple from the audience. Can you tell me what the most gratifying experience you've had with a startup founder was? I guess there was one guy who had an idea for a it was like a box that you're supposed to put on your desk and it's supposed to store data for you or whatever. And I talked to him. I got him onto a stage. He pitched it. He won the contest. And then he emails me one day and he's like, this is stupid. You're not letting me do that. You're not giving me the information I need. You're not giving me the access I need. He wanted me to do a post on him. And I said the thing that he was doing wasn't news. And he eventually realized that he was essentially alone in the world and that no one was going to help him. And once he realized that, then he could actually come back at me as a human being, and we could actually talk about what he needed and what his ideas were. And he was far less angry. He had far less aggravation once he realized that, and solved these problems for himself, as opposed to depending on media or depending on a PR person or depending on marketing to get these problems up for him, to solve these problems for him. And now he's actually a lot happier. I think we also had a situation. There was this one guy who had an idea of doing like an Amazon.com for building materials, and we were kind of joking around. We said, "But that sounds pretty cool. Maybe you could do like a big Lego for people." And he got pissed off, and he wanted to fight us. We were at an event somewhere, and I think it was in Savannah, and because we didn't give his idea the proper respect, I guess, in his mind. And that's one of the tricks with a startup founder. You're immediately and devastatingly humbled after a certain period of time when you do this sort of thing. When you build a startup, either your thing fails, or you fail, or you mess up something, or the investors come in and steal it out from under you. Until that happens, your ego lets you get carried away, and you mistake the self-importance with the importance of your system, with the importance of your news. And I'm trying to be as nice as possible, and it's very difficult for me to be nice because I've seen a lot of this stuff, and I want to make sure that people don't make the same mistakes that I've seen over and over again. But until you've been humbled and destroyed by the whole operation of creating a business and getting it out there, you really aren't ready to talk about it in a good way. I mean, think about what Jeff Bezos has to do. Almost every year, he has to talk to his investors and say, "Yeah, we're losing money," and he has to explain why they're losing money. He's going to convince a bunch of rich weirdos to give him more money potentially, or to accept that their money or their shares aren't going to be as high as they could be if you weren't losing money.
Working with a lot of startup founders, I think I have a little bit of empathy for, because I can understand exactly what you said, and I think I have a little empathy for like understanding that, hey, this is their baby, this is what they've spent a lot of time doing, and they've poured their all into it, right? But obviously, that on the grand scheme of things, it might not be as important as they believe. But your experience building FitRock or Freemit or any of these, did you ever allow yourself to jump into that like mind frame where, hey, this is what's all important? Or did you always kind of have that cynic in the back of your mind, a good journalist, where it's like, no, this is bullshit, or something like that?
Well, I think the importance, I don't ever think something's bullshit. I mean, unless you are building a cure for cancer. Again, we have to go back to the base ideas here. And Larry is asking if giving journalists early access to a Kickstarter project before it launches adds value. No, it doesn't. You shouldn't never do that, because that's really dumb, and you basically lose all the potential Kickstarter juice. You give it the day the thing launches, and then you basically have a couple posts that pop up every couple days about the Kickstarter. Then you actually get some Kickstarter. You get some activity on the Kickstarter. Going back to this founder self-importance, I find a lot of this, the founder snake oil problematic, because it convinces a already high functioning, high achieving person that all it takes is a lot of intensity to achieve greatness, and that's not nearly enough in this case to achieve greatness. There are two ways to break into the music business, I guess. You can become a really good guitarist. You can play 8 hours a day or 24 hours a day or whatever it takes to really get good, like Jimi Hendrix. And then somebody has to notice you. Somebody has to notice that you've gotten really good. There are plenty of really, really good players out there who get no attention because they just haven't been noticed. Or you get really, really lucky and somebody says, hey, this person would look good in tight pants and on stage, and let's do this thing. So either one of those things is all the things that are required for you to become a rock and roll star. For those to fall into place like dominoes is quite literally impossible. You have to be as good as possible on guitar. You have to be noticed by somebody who thinks you're going to look good in tight pants, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why the vast majority of us aren't rock stars. The same thing goes for startup founders. You can sit there and doodle on your website for 8 hours a day, and you could obsess over it. But unless you have a full package, unless you talk to the right investors at the right time, unless you go to the right event at the exact right time, unless you launch at the right time, your chance of success is almost zero. And if you are successful, then doing that fight day in and day out after you become slightly successful is even more difficult. So it's an uphill battle no matter what. So this whole startup snake oil thing is very dangerous for founders. And one of the things that I see, and I feel sorry for PR people about, is that they have founders who think, I did all this work. I've been sitting here in my room staring at I don't know, Node.js code for 4 months straight. So you as a PR person or you as a marketer have to go out there and sell my idea, because everybody's going to know as soon as they see it, it's going to be great. The vast majority of the world doesn't care about anybody's idea, let alone a self-described great one. Therefore, your job as a marketer is to give them a sense of perspective and ensure that the story that comes out of them is a human story, as opposed to a code story. And that's going to be, that kind of storytelling is really, really difficult. And the worst way to do it is through a press release. And the absolute second worst way to do it is to give a journalist a call and say, hey, did you see my email? Because you're absolutely guaranteed a failure on that point.
Well, yeah, I agree with what you said, and I also hope that this talk, which will be shared for free and everything, will go to further that mission as well. I think what you provided today was really insightful. So thank you for that. If you don't mind, we have. Go ahead.
Hold on. I come at this. Why am I cynical and why am I down on this? As people are going to say I'm arrogant or whatever. And I try to do this to help others avoid what I've gone through and what I've seen over and over again. Everybody has a great idea. You have to be really, really lucky to get it done, to complete it. And the fact that you've actually started something is a true testament to the creative, to your creativity and the value of you as a human being in the world. Therefore, go with, do what you need to do to get things done, but also don't expect the world to turn around and say, this is an amazing thing and we're going to do it. That takes a lot of luck, and that takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of the right things happening at the right time.
Well said, sir. If you don't mind, do you have a couple of minutes to just answer
Sure.
3 questions that we've had? All right. I'll start at the top. What themes are most interesting to you in the B2B world right now?
I don't know what that means. I would say nothing's interesting in the B2B world, I guess. For me specifically, the ability for a business to make its own app internally is really interesting. There's a company called Kinetize that's doing that. And that's actually really valuable because you don't have to outsource the apps. You can make your own data collection apps and all this other good stuff. The other thing in terms of B2B is that you can make a really powerful website in a few minutes with the right tools, with Node.js and some Docker stuff and all that good stuff. So Big Iron, I guess they used to call it, mainframes and stuff. Those are basically gone, and now anybody can make $1 million business in their basement, which is pretty cool.
Which service can you recommend to use to communicate to journalists who are looking for topics for articles that would not spam them? So maybe like a Haro, I think, is what.
Yeah, help a reporter out is the only thing. There's no journalist, absolutely no journalist who's looking for topics for articles. That mentality is completely wrong. Therefore, what you need to do is you need to be ready at the right time. One of my pet peeves is when I send somebody an email, hey, I wanted to write about your thing. And they're like, oh, okay, well, we're traveling right now. We'll get back to you. And then it's all right. Well, you're done. So there's really no opportunity there. And I have enough stuff that I can write in the world. If you're not a journalist, you don't have enough topics to write about, then you're a failure as a journalist. Therefore, you always have to be ready. So just be ready to communicate with journalists and always have some kind of story ready.
Perfect. So big takeaway from that is whenever a journalist wants to hop on the phone, you drop everything, you hop on the phone if this is what you really want. Another question actually went away. Sorry about that. Mm-hmm. The last one. How do we pitch a story as a young entrepreneur? Is that a hot topic still for tech reporters?
Like young, like 12?
Yeah, let's say between 12 and 18.
I think it's dumb. Yeah, this kid looks young. There's no, just because you're young doesn't mean you're smarter than anybody or better than anybody. But because you're young, you have a certain amount of, you don't have enough experience to understand that. Therefore, if you're a 12-year-old entrepreneur and you have an idea for, I don't know, a better frying pan, keep it to yourself until you actually ship that frying pan. And then don't focus on being a 12-year-old entrepreneur. One of the worst entrepreneurs I ever met was this kid. He was like 14 or something. And I don't know what his issues were, but they were exacerbated by being young as opposed to being improved. So he drove everybody nuts. He was eventually bought by Yahoo. And we all know how Yahoo ended up. I don't know what their judgment was there. But you just can't do, if you're a young entrepreneur, just do what you want to do and just keep building. And you might hit, you might not, but there's really don't use your youth and inexperience as a leader, because you're basically just going to shoot yourself in the foot. I talked to a watch company, and they're all saying that they're like, oh, we started this company when we were 20. I'm like, I don't care. It's really has no bearing on the world. And that you started this company when you were 20 shows me that you got a lot more. You were a lot luckier than skilled.
And is it just basically in the end, if you have a good product or not, that's the most important part?
Yeah, if you have a good product, that's the story to tell. Don't tell the story that you started this company when you were in diapers or whatever. I don't know if that's what we're asking specifically, but it seems that way. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think that was the question. Okay, well, John, thank you so much for taking the time. I think this was really good. Everybody will be posting this online for people to see as well. John, I'll send it to you as well if you'd like to share it around. And if you have any questions, please go ahead and let us know. Just email jim@publicize.co, and I'm happy to answer anything we can. John, thanks you.
All right, sounds good.
Take care.
All right, thanks.
Bye-bye.